All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health. I got the man, the myth, the legend, Ian Smith here with me today. I heard a rumor that he mixes his protein shakes with liberal tears. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, no, I really appreciate you coming on here. Would it be bad for me to say that I think you've probably done more for liberty in the last 2 years than the Libertarian Party and our former president, Donald Trump?
Well, we've certainly tried. That was our objective from the beginning. It was never about a gym as much as it was. It was something much bigger than that. The gym was the vehicle that we were able to kind of drive this movement from. But it was always about liberty. And I would certainly say more than the Libertarian Party, as much as I do value libertarianism. A lot of people have always asked me, like, why don't you vote Libertarian? And it's because the last Libertarian I voted for was Ron Paul, because he was the only one who was even worth, quote unquote, throwing a vote away for. So we've certainly tried.
Right. Well, I think you guys have done an absolutely fantastic job. But, kind of that being said, I do consider myself a libertarian. But after 2020, if you haven't kind of shaped your worldview around something a little bit more pragmatic and useful, I think everybody knows that a majority of Republicans are useless. But there are some coming up that are a consequence of Trump. But as much as I'm not a Trump guy for the fact that he failed every time it came time for him to do something, he's still out here pumping the vaccine and not speaking out against the biggest issue of our time, lockdowns and vaccine mandates. The people on the local level are so much more important. And I see that you're taking action yourself. So what encouraged you to run for Congress?
I think that we have a major cultural issue today in politics, and kind of multifaceted, but the easiest way to describe it is that we have career politicians. Fundamentally, you cannot serve your constituents while at the same time always having your eye on the next election and what you need to do and what money you need to raise and what political favors you need to pay back. This idea that politics is now this career field where a lot of people make an insane amount of money and use it as sort of like a catapult into the upper echelons of society is flawed. We keep wondering why we get the same result, and it's because we keep picking the same assholes.
Right.
And it's just the system won't work like that. It's supposed to be a public service. There was a time in this country where people used to serve as their mayor or their town council or even their congressman, and they would serve for a few terms, and then they would go back to their life because politics wasn't an avenue to gain wealth and power. It was a service. And when they were done, then they went and did all of those other pursuits. You're not, it's just like serving in the army. You don't see people getting filthy rich while doing, their 4 to 8 years or whatever in the service. It's not meant to do that. And when you bring that element into it, the system is going to fail. The founding fathers of this country, one of my favorite stories is the fact that it took them almost a year to convince George Washington to come back to Washington, D.C., or back to the Capitol at that time, and be president, because he didn't want to be, because he had already done his service. He was he fought the Revolutionary War. He was there, during the Declaration of Independence and all of these things. And, he had done his time, and he was going to go back to his life and get back to the things that he wanted to do. So until we start looking at it like that, we're going to keep having the same problems. So, I've been telling people this for 2 years now, or close to, and I realized that I had to kind of put my money where my mouth is, because I am in an unusual circumstance where, as an ordinary citizen, I can step up and potentially mount a real campaign at a federal level, which part of the cultural problem is that we don't get to pick our candidates. Our candidates typically get picked for us because You don't have the blessing of the establishment. You're just a man or woman who wants to run for Congress.
We had a little connectivity issues there, but we still got the fire going here. So, anyways,
so there was a time where politicians were it was viewed as a service, and my favorite story is that of George Washington. It took them almost a full year to convince him to come be the president because he had done his service to the country and to his community, and he was going to go on with his regular life. And I think that the more that we get back to that, the more we'll see higher quality political representatives. And we'll get back to that idea of a public servant and somebody who serves the wishes of their constituents and their community, and not themselves or the people that give them plenty of money to get reelected, or the party line that they're supposed to be towing. And I think part of the reason that we don't have those candidates is because we don't really get to pick who our candidates are.
right.
Very rarely does somebody walk into a primary, especially at the federal level, as an ordinary person without the blessing of either the DNC or the GOP,
Right.
Or have a big platform or whatever it is. It's just not easy. And I am in the unusual circumstance where I don't need the blessing of the GOP because I have my own platform. And I can do the same thing that we did at Atillis and create a people-powered movement where we don't care what the GOP says. We're going to run, and we're going to get the votes, and we're going to fundraise enough to not to beat out in terms of fundraising, but enough to be able to fight back. But we're going to launch a grassroots campaign, which is exactly what an election should be. And hopefully in doing so, we'll normalize that, and we'll show people the power that they have if they start participating in politics more often, and pay attention to things like the primary, because again, a lot of your voters don't even pay attention to that. So when it comes time to vote, they're just voting for their guy and not the other guy. They haven't really vetted these candidates.
Right.
So again, I'm in that unique opportunity where I can use what has happened at Atillis to maybe influence the culture of politics.
Right. And the whole purpose of this channel is to make better libertarians, or people who have a political leaning, right? We want to push the message of liberty and health. So
yeah.
The reason why I think you have such a good chance and why your story is so interesting, you mentioned Ron Paul, but you're in a similar situation, right? Ron Paul birthed thousands of people, right? So this whole community knew who he was, and they loved him. They knew him as this old Republican country doctor who's an anti-war guy and who cared about the people, right? Well, they look at you and they see the same exact thing, man. I'm telling you, you're a guy who said, look, we're not putting up with this stuff. This violates our Constitution. This violates our rights, our freedom of association, our own private freaking property. That's your place of business. This is how you make a freaking living. That is the most atrocious, human rights violation I could possibly think of to ever come to this country. And when people see someone like you sticking up for it, kicking your door down, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think our founding fathers would be incredibly proud. And I know Ron Paul, would share that same sentiment. So it's great to see that there are people fighting back. How is the legal battle going? Are you still kind of arm wrestling the state?
Yeah, so the courts move incredibly slow when you're moving against the state, and they also move incredibly fast when you're moving when the state is moving against you. Like there were days like during the heat of this battle where Governor Murphy would file a motion in the morning and we would be in court by the afternoon. It was just incredible. So it's just a slow crawl. This is part of the game that we knew we were going to play. It's a 12-round fight, and they're going to try everything they possibly can to beat you in rounds 1 through 11. They're going to drag things out financially. They're going to slander you. They're going to drag you through the mud. They're going to try to punish you into submission. So now we're just at like that lull where things are working their way through the courts. It's 30 days for this motion, 30 days for a reply, 30 days for another reply, 30 days for a scheduling hearing, 30 days to schedule. So things just take a while. We wound up in 4 courts altogether. We have municipal court, we have 2 state courts, and then we have a criminal court. So the 3 of them are civil court and 1 is criminal. We were charged with 7 counts of criminal contempt of court. We wound up just pleading guilty to 1 charge each. The question in that court is, did we violate a court order to shut down? And the answer is yes. The question isn't in that court isn't, did we violate or was that court order unconstitutional? We have to take that up with a higher court. And unfortunately, the criminal court didn't want to wait. So it wasn't worth us fighting it, just to wind up being guilty or to spend trials are very expensive.
Right.
You're talking $30,000, $40,000 for each of us just for the trial day itself. So it's just not, we only have limited resources in terms of funds, in terms of energy, and in terms of time. So we pled guilty to it. We got 1 year of probation for the heinous crime of taking our doors off of the hinges to impede the county sheriff from locking it. And it is what it is. It's not fun because that could be some nasty trap that we walk into later, being on probation. But we work with how it comes to us. We don't know our way through this. It's just 2 dumb gym owners trying to figure it out along the way. And we've done a pretty good job of making the right call and knowing where to fight our battles. The other one, so we are in state court, the appellate division. All of the state action that came against us was built off of the executive order, which is just a meaningless piece of paper. All of those municipal citations that we got at the municipal level, there's like 90 of them, ranging from violation of a governor's orders, which is, again, a meaningless charge. It's basically like a public nuisance charge. We got disorderly persons charges. We've got all sorts of operating without a business license. They took those 2 things and they went to a judge and they said, hey, along with a health department shutdown, they said, hey, write a court order to shut them down. That's where all of our trouble came from in the way of fines and civil punishment, because a judge's court order is legal, supposed to be legally binding. So we're in the appellate division for that. That's where we got fined, $2.3 million or whatever the ridiculous sum is. That's where they seized our money. That's where they locked our doors. So we're in the appellate division for that. We got the corporation was pierced. They moved to pierce the LLC. So Frank and I are responsible for that $2.3 million, which at this point is just really monopoly money. Like you're not going to bleed a stone.
Right.
We spend everything that we have in the business, and we don't own a lot. And that's kind of, it is what it is. It's part of the strategy is, we put everything we have into this fight. So we're in the appellate division for that, moving slowly. We're in the appellate division now for suing the township to get our business license back. They revoked our business license with no due process. It's a legal proceeding that is supposed to happen, and they made it a low-level administrative hearing, which basically means all due process was thrown out the window. No sworn testimony, no discovery, no cross-examination. We asked them to delay because there was criminal proceedings going on, so we pled the 5th, violated that as well. They wound up taking it. We're in the appellate division for that. And then the big one is the municipal court, which got kicked down the road over and over and over again because COVID. God forbid people do their jobs these days. And finally, we wound up in another township because we have a conflict of interest in the township that we're in. So we wound up in front of the head judge of the county, and she sits in a couple towns over. And honestly, she was the most normal and rational human being that we've come in contact with in government in 2 years, if my entire life. She heard our concerns. We haven't had any formal proceedings yet, but we've talked on the record. This is a case that got transferred to them. So the prosecutor in that town is a small town. He doesn't even know what to do with this file. Our file looks like a shit sandwich. It's just this atrocious beast of paperwork. So he doesn't really know what to do with it. He doesn't know what the state wants to do with it. And the judge seems very open to all of our ideas being heard. We will try the case, and we will bring forth all of the unconstitutional actions against us, all violations of our rights. It will be a big trial, but it'll start at the municipal level. And if we can win there, or if that case gets thrown out, that is the linchpin to all of it, because everything was based on that initial action, and that kind of just pulls the bottom out from it, which would be a great thing. So that's what we have our time and energy sort of put into right now. making sure that our arguments are the right ones and that we're going to be bringing them forth the right way. What we've learned about the legal system is that if you don't advocate your own ideas, oftentimes your lawyers will not argue the right things. And that's no dig at our lawyers, but nobody's going to defend yourself like you will. Mm-hmm. So, Frank especially, but Frank and I spend a lot of time just sort of figuring out what we're going to say and what arguments want to be brought forth. And in the meantime, the gym is open every single day. We just passed 352,000 visits to the facility. Still no COVID. We have an extensive contacts tracing system in place that we have kept in place, even though we don't need it, just to keep racking that number up. We'll probably stop around 1 million visits or so. But yeah, that was the strategy from the beginning, was open the gym at all costs and do not let these people shut us down no matter what they do. So we've already won. Now it's just the icing on the cake.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that it seems like it's moving forward, but as with anything government, as soon as it gets started, it becomes this amorphous blob that just never stops and doesn't really do anything good for anybody at all. It's kind of funny that now the mainstream scientists are starting to kind of turn back around and backpedal a little bit. I don't know if you saw, there was a Johns Hopkins study that came out and said that lockdown saved a whopping total of 4,000 lives. And
yes,
what's the collateral damage here? I don't have some of the stats off the top of my head, but I know you're very well informed. But the CDC or the WHO came out like a year and a half ago saying asymptomatic transmission doesn't happen. Well, we did lockdowns because asymptomatic transmission, right? These
asymptomatic is another word for not sick.
Yep.
That's that. But the whole thing was based on trickery and deceit. Mm-hmm. It was based on bad science. But yeah, the Johns Hopkins study came out, and it's incredible that we have to even study that. I think the average person, using common sense, can tell you that we did more harm than good. Mm-hmm. I think using just objective information, and even just information that people come across in their everyday lives, I think it's easy to see that we've done a lot of damage here. Anybody who has children, your children have suffered greatly. Anybody who's just really a hard worker and wants to get ahead in life has been held back by this. The economy has been just driven off a cliff, honestly. Like, somehow it's still standing and still moving, but here in New Jersey, 1/3 of small businesses never reopened. And currently 2/3 of all small businesses are either downsizing or planning on maybe not making it much longer. And everything that they said was a lie. They made up this idea of asymptomatic. That means not sick. You don't go to the doctor and say, like, I have body aches, and or you don't go to the doctor and say, I think I have the flu, and they say, how do you know? And you just say, I don't. They're going to ask you, like, well, do you have body aches? Mm-hmm. Do you feel very tired, loss of appetite, loss of smell? Again, if you go to any doctor, if you go into the ER and say, I'm having a heart attack, and ask you what's wrong, you say nothing. It's crazy, but it was the media machine just at work, just hammering these bullshit ideas into people's heads, ratcheting up the fear. I'm sure you remember in the beginning, they were showing bodies dropping in the streets in China, and like body bags outside of hospitals, and they were rolling footage that looked like a hospital in a war movie. It was absolutely theatrics, and they've done a tremendous amount of damage. And I honestly, I think it was intentional. I don't think that you can be this stupid, to get it this wrong. I really don't. People, that aggravates me when they're like, oh, Joe Biden's so stupid, or like, Nancy Pelosi, or whoever their politician is, left or right, that they don't like. And it's like, these people are not stupid. Like, to think that is very stupid, because they're very smart people, and it's all theater. And just as many Republicans almost as many Republicans are guilty of this political theater that we've seen over the past 2 years as there are Democrats. You know, the Democrats tend to get villainized a little bit more, you know, but I'm of the belief that the Republicans are the professional losers of this game, you know, and they always come up short. You know, what has the conservative movement conserved over the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years? What have we conserved? We haven't conserved anything.
We've given up the structures of leftists.
True. Yeah. They've conserved the status quo of you know, establishment politics, if anything. Good answer, because that's the only one. Right. You know, and it's sickening to watch because we are getting played. Left, right, black, white, young, old, you know, lower income, middle income, you know, even what most of us consider, you know, upper echelons of income, we're all getting played. And we've been getting played, and it's got to come to a stop because it's just gotten to the point of absurdity. Like, if you watch these people, just the way they carry out or they carry on, you know, like I was watching something earlier of Nancy Pelosi giving a press conference. She just walks away when she's done talking. Like when she no longer wants to answer tough questions, she just like just puts her mask on and walks away. And these people are just not accountable. And it's high time that we change that. But it does start at the local level. It starts with the average man, average woman, you know, starting to get their eyes on what's going on. And for now, I truly feel like people need to be living and breathing politics every moment of every day. I hope it's not always like that. But to get this thing moving in the other direction where we want it to go, we need that. We need people to not be afraid to talk politics everywhere, and not be afraid to stand up for the right thing. You know, we saw so much compliance by people who didn't even believe the COVID narrative over the past 2 years. And that was like maddening for us. You know, we would have people come to the gym a lot and you know, don't misinterpret it. You know, we appreciate the support, but people would come to the gym and you know, buy a t-shirt and support us and be like, thank you so much for doing this. You know, I'm a small business owner and you know, my business is closed. And I'm like, I don't want you to thank me. I want you to go open your fucking business. And that's, you're starting now to see it. It's finally starting to click with people. And I think you're seeing a mass sort of awakening especially under the last 9-10 months with Joe Biden. They have just ratcheted up the crazy. And everybody's starting to see it now.
Right. It's a real emperor has no clothes moment. And over the last 2 years, when, you know, you print trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, and now you have inflation rampant, people go to the store, they can't afford to buy groceries, their bills are going up, you can't afford to buy a freaking car anymore. Everything you need to do is that much more difficult. People are pissed. People are livid. Every restaurant you go to, nobody wants to work. The labor force participation rate's down at 62%. So where are these 38% of people? We paid them so handsomely not to go to work. So why the hell are they going to go back to work? You got no reason to. You got paid to stay home. Ian, you've been very, very generous with your time, and I'm very, very grateful you're able to do this. I got 2 questions I ask every guest before we rock and roll out of here.
Sure.
We'll throw the first one at you. What does liberty look like to you?
Liberty looks like the ability for people to live together or in proximity to one another, and exist peacefully, with the notion that each person respects the choices of the next man or woman as they would want their own choices to be respected. And obviously that goes with the thou shalt do no harm tenement. You know, it's you can't just say do whatever you want. But nobody should have the ability to regulate one another's behavior, beliefs, choices, and actions, so long as that individual is not directly impacting your life.
I agree completely, and that was a beautiful way to put it. And the second question is, what does health look like to you?
Health looks like freedom for me. You know, health looks like control. we live in a crazy, crazy world, and it's a crazy thing to be alive. And however you believe you got here, whether it's God or science or somewhere in between the two, you are blessed to be a living, breathing human being. And health is about understanding and connecting with your body and learning to make the most of that gift that you've been given. And sadly, not enough of us do that. That was why I got into health in the first place, because I lived the first 20 years of my life not really giving a crap about my health, or at least not giving it much thought. And and I had an incident where I probably should have passed away, and I didn't. And that gave me a little bit of a wake up call, and I became fascinated with the idea of pushing my limits and learning what I was truly capable of, and how I could use my body and nourish my body, and the amazing things that I could do with it. Health is an infinite exploration into something that, if you're lucky, you'll understand just a small percentage of.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think I can't remember what somebody said, but I think I said something to the degree of, I think everybody throughout this pandemic, if they pushed, pulled, and swung kettlebells until they puked, we'd be a lot better off.
It would.
At least once or twice a week.
That is absolutely true. It's to be honest, my buddy said it recently in one of his podcasts. Andy Frisella was saying, they were talking about something else, how somebody was screaming at, there's a video that they were dissecting, I think, of this big woman who clearly has quite a bit of extra weight on her, screaming at somebody to put a mask on because they were putting their health at risk.
Right.
And he said, to the point, he's like, if, it's not about if you're overweight or unhealthy or not. It's about the fact that you've had 2 years to do something about it and you've chosen not to. And you want to place that responsibility upon somebody else. Right. And it's the state of health that we see today is a direct result of the standard that most people hold themselves to. And government, just like you said earlier, doesn't ever really do anything for anybody. They haven't encouraged that. They've also had 2 years to educate the public, to help out about getting people healthier and push, pull, swing some kettlebells. It is definitely not rocket science. But they didn't do that. And I think that tells you their intentions quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I've probably done close to 2 hours worth of podcast reviewing all of the science. I'm sure you're well aware of it too, that COVID does disproportionately affect the obese. Your fat cells serve as a reservoir for disease. So, take care of yourself, man. I know plenty of people who got severely sick with COVID. I know a guy who died from COVID that I work with. But I mean, these were all people who were incredibly unhealthy, and they had 2 years since this thing started to kind of start taking care of themselves, and they failed to do that. And I'm not looking down my nose at these people, because I was unhealthy too at one point. But, at what point do you decide this is my responsibility? I'm going to do everything I can to make myself a little bit better. You don't got to be shredded, but you could do a little bit better. We all can.
Well, yeah, Ian, I mean, that goes on the idea of liberty. Liberty is also about self-accountability. And there's a reason that there's a large portion of the population that wants to be governed. Because they don't want to be self-accountable. So if you're interested in liberty, you're interested in the personal accountability that comes with that. And I think that's something that we need to start teaching more, is that idea. No matter how, quote unquote, politically incorrect your statement just may have been to some people, nonetheless, it is a correct statement. And it's about high time we start speaking like that and getting those ideas out there.
Right. And, it's very, very sad that our public health establishment, completely dropped the ball on this one, because this was perhaps the greatest chance to inform people like, hey, you just really got to take care of yourself. Like I said, you ain't got to be, looking like Ronnie Coleman, but if you could just lose a couple pounds, then you'll be doing much better. Ian, where can everybody find you?
You can follow me on social media, Ian Smith Fitness. That is Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're interested in checking out our congressional platform, that is iansmithforcongress.com. Website's being built out. We have just a landing page with an email list right now, but we'll have a full platform up on there talking about policies and talking about not only what we want to do, but how we want to get it done, as well as volunteer opportunities, updates, and stuff like that heading forward. And you can always follow the gym at theatillisgym.com. That's ATILIS. That's where you'll find all the updates about the gym. We do blog posts, writing in detail about what's going on with the legal stuff. There's merchandise on there. And of course, if you're ever in the area, come on by the Atillis Gym. We're open 7 days a week, and we certainly won't be closed.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. I'm just one state over from you, but if I'm ever out in Jersey, I would love to bang as many deadlifts until we could throw up and rock and roll to a tourist area or something like that, man. You have a spot here on this podcast anytime. I fully endorse you, and I think anybody who is libertarian leaning, right leaning, and anybody who's just sick of this shit should feel the same way and should absolutely endorse you. So one more time, I just want to thank you for coming on. And until next time, everybody, take care.